So I have been visiting the United States of America for a little over 1 week. I think today is my 8th day being back, and I'm gonna be honest with you. While the US will probably always be my home because this is where I spent my formative years and really most of my life up to this point, I am fairly confident in saying that Europe, and the Netherlands in particular, has become my second home. And maybe one day the roles will be reversed. Maybe one day Europe will be my home and the US will be my second home. I don't know. But what I do know is that I'm starting to feel a little bit homesick. And I know it's very interesting to say that, given that I'm currently walking in a neighborhood that many of my childhood friends lived in growing up. And I spent a lot of time in this neighborhood, and I don't live very far from this neighborhood, so it's pretty interesting to say that I feel homesick while technically being at home. But when I say I'm feeling homesick, what I mean is that there are things that I am sorely missing about being in Europe, and in the Netherlands in particular. The first of which being the public transit. So I know in the past I've said that I like driving. I like to drive. It brings me peace of mind. It calms my nerves. That used to be the case until I realized that, for one, gas is expensive, and two, people out here can't drive, so I always have to kind of be on edge. In the Netherlands, one of the biggest things that I came to appreciate was the alternate forms of transportation. And this is something that I've probably talked about in almost every video comparing the US to the Netherlands. But again, this cannot be overstated. This cannot be overstated. It's a very important component of what makes the quality of life in Europe higher than it is here in the US. The accessibility to public transit. This is a pretty interesting sign right here. I'm not going to speak on that. Everyone has their own beliefs, but I don't know. It's pretty interesting. I don't think I really saw a lot of signs like that being back in Europe, but I digress. Being able to ride your bike to the bus stop, get on the bus, which pretty much always arrives either on time or just a few minutes late at most, and take the bus to the train station and get on the train and pretty much go anywhere you want. That is something that I really miss, because here, if you don't have a car, you are pretty much SOL. You are shit out of luck. Unless you're willing to foot the bill for taking Ubers everywhere you go. And that right there, if you think car ownership is expensive, try living off of Uber. I mean, you're talking, especially with the distances out here in the US and in Dallas in particular, you're talking about probably $30 to $50 a trip. I remember one time when I lived in my apartment, to get from the airport, DFW airport, to Allen, Texas, which is still within the same metropolitan area, it cost me $120. $120. I'm still salty about that. This was in 2022. I'm still salty about that. I guess the Dutch frugality has really rubbed off on me throughout the past 14 months. But nobody's really trying to pay that on a day-to-day basis. And that was just for one trip going one way. So you can imagine how expensive that gets over time. Out here, you pretty much have to get a car. I mean, you see all the cars here, and that's not to say that people don't have cars in the Netherlands. The difference is people don't need cars in the Netherlands. At least probably 98% of the country's population has no need for a car. They just get it out of convenience. And even then, it seems like a lot of families have fewer cars than American families do. Because I know growing up, my mom had a car, my dad had a car, and then my sister got a car, I got a car, and then we still had an extra car on top of that just because it was already paid off. So we had 5 cars for 4 people, which I would say is a bit extreme and unnecessary, but here in the US, it is necessary. You do have to have a car, and ideally you have to have your own car. Otherwise, you are going to spend much of your time carpooling with people, and nobody's really trying to do all of that. Because again, the distances are so vast and you have to have a car. I really miss being able to cycle and take public transit, because although I do have access to that fifth car that I was just talking about, my parents' car, it's an older minivan, so not the prettiest thing, but it gets me from point A to point B cheaply. It is much cheaper to take the bus or the NS train or just cycle. It's much cheaper. You can't beat that in terms of the price. And again, that Dutch frugality has really worn off of me. I'm trying to save as much money as possible. I'm trying to stack my bread. I'm either gonna save my money or put it into things that I feel can make me more money. So having to drive a car to get from point A to point B almost feels a bit oppressive in a sense. And I know it's kind of ironic for me to say that, because a car is supposed to be a symbol of freedom. And it is a symbol of freedom unless it's a requirement. When it becomes a necessity, it is no longer a symbol of freedom. It becomes a symbol of oppression. But I don't know. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. But I just know I really, really miss the public transit and the bike lanes back in the Netherlands, back in my second home. The next thing that I miss about being in Europe and in the Netherlands in particular is the prevalence of Dutch. So I'm gonna be honest with you. I lived in the Netherlands for 14 months and I feel like I could have done a lot more than I did to learn the language. And I think a big part of me not investing that time and energy into it was not knowing if we were going to be there for the long term. But now that we're here in the US and we don't necessarily know if we're going back to the Netherlands in particular, we know we're going to leave the US, but we don't know if we're going back to the Netherlands specifically. I kind of wish that I had taken the opportunity that was in front of me to really double down and learn the language, because now being back in the US, from time to time I sort of just randomly start conversations in Dutch with my girlfriend, and although the conversations are only 2 to 3 sentences at a time, I've realized that I've come a very long way in terms of learning Dutch, a very, very long way. And it's like, wow, what if instead of doing one Duolingo lesson a day and just occasionally listening to Dutch songs or watching Dutch movies, what if I had really, really focused just 1 or 2 hours a day on learning Dutch? I'd probably be near fluent by now, because I'm already very gifted when it comes to English and just grammatical conventions. So if I had taken the time to refine my technical expertise in another language, I'm sure I could have learned it very quickly as well. But now there's a very real possibility that that opportunity has passed me. And being here in the US, in Texas in particular, I don't have the opportunity to be surrounded by Dutch, to be inundated by the Dutch language, in the Dutch language rather. And even going on Netflix and things like that, a lot of the Dutch movies that we had access to in the Netherlands, we don't really have access to here, because of course Netflix is different depending on what country you're in. And maybe I could get a VPN or something, but I don't even know if we're going to go back to the Netherlands specifically. But I'm still doing my Duolingo lessons. I'm still trying my best to talk to my girlfriend in Dutch at least once a day and just sort of maintain what I've built already. But I miss having that opportunity to, at the very least, refine my listening ability, because for me, I think that's where I really developed the most, other than reading of course, was listening. Just listening to Dutch and realizing month by month that I could decipher more and more of what people were saying in their conversations. And yes, I was eavesdropping. Was it rude? Probably, but hey, I was trying to learn, and that was the best way for me to learn. So not having that opportunity here, because everyone here speaks English or Spanish, that's been a bit difficult for me, and I do miss that component of being in the Netherlands. But not just for the reasons that I stated, also because it contributes to the next thing that I miss about being in Europe, being in the Netherlands, and that is the peace of mind. The peace of mind. So when you're surrounded by people who are speaking a language that you don't even really understand, what ends up happening is, most of the time, if you're not actively listening so that you can, again, refine your listening skills, you sort of tune it out. You just naturally tune it out. And what this does is this allows you to really embrace your inner dialogue, and that's where a lot of creative inspiration and ideas come from. And I don't have that opportunity here anymore because, again, people here speak English. They speak the language that I speak and understand very, very well. So when I'm surrounded by people who are talking, I'm subconsciously listening to the things that they're saying. I can't just tune them out and listen to my inner dialogue because their words are invading my mental space and taking up my psychological bandwidth. And I know it probably sounds like I'm being a bit dramatic, but if you've ever traveled to a country where you didn't know the language, once you get past that initial feeling of just being lost and not knowing what anyone's talking about, and maybe even feeling a bit like an outsider, you come to realize that it's incredibly peaceful. But that's not the only reason why I felt more at peace in the Netherlands. Look, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm not a political person by any means. I'm an apolitical person by every stretch of the imagination. I don't like talking about politics. I don't like reading about politics. I don't even like to eavesdrop on conversations about politics. I don't like to think about politics. But it's pretty much impossible to avoid here in the US. It's pretty much impossible because everybody has sort of picked a side. They're either left or right, and everyone is ride or die for their side. Literally, they are ride or die. And what this means is that media companies are going to cater to that. They're going to cater to the fact that people are very, very politically biased, and they're going to put out this information, and it's pretty much impossible to avoid it. I think I've said this in the past, but I've installed this extension on my Google Chrome browser called Unhook, where I don't see any recommended videos anymore. I don't have a recommended feed on my YouTube, but I can hear my parents talking about it. I can hear my extended family talking about it. And I'm like, man, this is really robbing me of my peace of mind. A lot of times when I hear people talking about this, I just walk away. I'm like, man, listen, I understand this is affecting everyone here, but look, I'm providing an alternate solution. Just leave. If you don't like the way that things are, leave. That's what I've done. I left, and I'm very glad that I did it, because when I'm in the Netherlands, I don't have to hear people talking about tariffs or whatever else is going on. Again, I'm not politically informed like that because I don't really engage in these discussions because I don't see the point. If you don't like the direction that things are going in, go somewhere else. And that is what I would recommend to any American who feels that same way. If you don't like the direction that things are going in, if you want to have control over your body or whatever else, whatever other beliefs you may have, move somewhere that aligns with the beliefs that you have, instead of trying to engage in these pointless political discussions that don't actually get anywhere. But I don't know. Maybe that's as logical as I think it is, or maybe it's just unnecessarily contrarian of me. I don't know.